Welcome guys, gals and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary and feminist perspective. My name is Joel, I'm one of your hosts, and with me as always is my tenacious co-host
D. I'm just kidding, it's Brian.
Welcome Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
This week we'll be talking about Season 3 of Buffy, Episode 13, The Zeppo.
Yeah, I was going to say, no, it's Season 2, but no, that's not true at all.
Moments before I started speaking on air, I asked you, is it Season 3, Episode 13? And you said indeed it was.
Your Buffy and summary for the week.
You want to take the match out of your mouth before you start speaking?
It's not match, it's a bit of plastic.
Okay.
So, sidelined from the struggle against another apocalypse, we see this semi-parodically in background shots and mocked by a vengeful Cordelia. Xander is befriended by and has to defeat zombie delinquents who plan to blow up the school. Along the way, Faith casually seduces him. Cordelia mocks him again, and Xander is smugly cool. Sorry, I've gotten this all backwards and stuff. But yeah, there you go. There's your Buffy on summary. It was shit. This is, Season 3, Episode 13. It was first aired on January 26th, 1999. It was directed by James Whitmore Jr., who we've had a bunch already. And it was written by Dan Weber, who also wrote Lover's Walk. And he never writes again for Buffy. He goes off and he writes for Simpsons and Futurama and stuff.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That was an incredibly murky Buffy on summary in terms of actually framing what the episode was about.
I think I understand what happened in that episode less now.
Yeah. But just in terms of putting that chronologically, so this is the Xander episode, where the most important thing that's happening in the episode is that he is, as they say, sidelined to get donuts and try and figure out how to be useful to the group because he is powerless and gets tied up in his own adventure with some dead teenagers who are trying to blow up the school, and does help save the day. But we see in the background that the Hellmouth has opened again, and the rest of the gang are trying to stop the beast from coming through. So before we get into that old tangled mess, Brian, this week you have been playing a little indie video game, unknown studio, just a real kind of scrappy effort, but you've been really enjoying it. Do you want to talk a bit about that? Yeah,
so last week, Star Wars The Fallen Order? Fallen Order was released, which is a Star Wars game. But it's a Star Wars game because basically whoever made this game has been playing Uncharted, Dark Souls, and what was the other thing we said? There was another influence. Tomb Raider maybe, yeah. But all those kind of action games / Dark Souls for the last couple of years, and decided to make a Star Wars game based on it. Mm-hmm. So it got a bunch of really good reviews, and we decided we were going to play it. I was going to play it and you would watch, which has turned out to be, me playing it and you playing another video game and pretending to watch in the corner. It's been weirdly good. I mean, I don't know. I really don't know anything about Star Wars. Someone asked me recently what the plot of the third movie of Star Wars was, and I was like, I don't know.
We go to see every Star Wars film when it comes out, though.
Yeah. Actually, it's been really nice the last couple of years because the Star Wars movies, except for Solo, have been releasing around Christmas. We've been going to see them with basically my whole family around Christmas. It's really nice. We'll go for dinner beforehand and watch Star Wars. We went to see the Last Jedi a couple of years ago with my parents. And in the moment after the huge, explosive, brilliant scene happens where Laura Dern explodes or hyper jumps
flying.
Yeah, hyper jumps into a ship, and the whole theater went quiet because there's a moment where everything's quiet. My father was the person in the audience who said very loudly, "Has the sound turned off?"
Yeah, and it's probably important to point out that your father had recently woken up as well.
Yeah, he sleeps through most movies that we go to see in the cinema, which I would think is just such a waste of money.
Yeah. But he brings everyone else there, and then his watch is ended, but without this, so you don't have a deep and abiding lore-filled background in Star Wars, and yet in playing Fallen Order, fair to say it's been an innovative game that you've played. Yeah,
I've been enjoying it. There's a weird, there's a weird amount of just it's well built as a game. As in this, it's buggy as shit, and there's loads of weird moments where just he'll start floating around and stuff, which I mean I don't really mind.
Force powers, yeah,
of course. And but I mean, just the worlds themselves that you end up in are weirdly well developed. But it was nice because we recently watched Rogue One again. That was very upsetting.
Just in terms that it's a very emotionally challenging film.
Yeah. Everyone dies.
Yeah.
It just, everyone dies.
It's very good. I think we discussed our power rating for the Star Wars films.
What was your top 5? Actually, no, rate them all for me right now.
Okay. So, remind me if I forget a Star Wars film. Okay.
No.
Okay. Well, if you remember a Star Wars film that I forget, let's try and work from the bottom. I think is the easiest way.
Sure.
To do. Solo's the worst one.
Solo, absolutely.
Just because it's flat and there's nothing there, and it's just the worst of like the mid this decade kind of media.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Great cast in many ways, really wasted. So that's the worst. After that, I would probably have to say Attack of the Clones.
Okay.
And then Revenge of the Sith.
Obviously interchangeable to some degree.
To some degree, yeah. I think, Revenge. They're hard to tell apart in terms of quality, so I'd have to agree with you on that. And then after that, probably Phantom Menace, because even though it's so derided, I kind of like. I have some affection for how much of a big swing it took.
And it's such a kids movie in some ways. It's quite nice.
It is a kids movie. It introduced the concept that we could do Star Wars again after Star Wars was finished, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And if nothing else, the good parts of it, like specifically really the fight scene with Darth Maul, with the John Williams who scored Duel of the Fakes, that's worth the price of entry, I think. It was years before I realised that Keira Knightley and Natalie Portman were playing two different characters.
Me too.
In that
it took
film.
A long time, yeah.
So that's that, and then after that, I'd probably have to say Return of the Jedi, which is the one with the Ewoks, Brian, number 3, which people like, but it's a bit like it doesn't stand out in people's memory. People when they rewatch Star Wars, they rarely get that far, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, sure.
And then after that, probably
Force Awakens.
The Force Awakens.
Yeah. And
then Rogue One.
Fair. Reasonably interchangeable as well, I'd say.
Yeah.
They're both very good.
Yeah,
I'd probably agree with you up to that point. I'd probably swap Force Awakens and Rogue One. I think Rogue One is less good than Force Awakens.
I just enjoyed Rogue One so much when we rewatched it, particularly because it just felt like an actual film. I don't know, it was something it was because it was the first film that wasn't part of the main sequence. I just felt unencumbered and adventurous in a way that didn't always work, but I was very here for it. And then where are we up to after that would have to be A New Hope, sure. I think.
Okay.
Not a lot actually happens in it in terms of where they get to story-wise when you look back.
But it started
but
everything.
It's so fundamental. I'm always amazed that that's all that happens to some degree.
Yeah.
Because
every line of that movie is like iconic though.
Yeah, everything is a still painting. All paintings are still. It's amazing. Then probably Empire Strikes Back, which is usually people's favourite film for many reasons. And then I think The Last Jedi.
Yeah, very good.
We
loved Last Jedi,
and while you like Star Wars is not necessarily your fandom, like I've been on the Star Wars wiki in deep since it was called the Wikipedia. I've played Star Wars games since they were released by LucasArts. I've read the novels. I know who the Yusang Vong are. I know who Mara Jade is.
I know who that is too.
I know who the actual Sith Lord named Ben is. I know my chops here, and I think The Last Jedi by far is the best Star Wars film.
For my money's worth, it is the best movie out of any of them in the sense that it stands alone as a very, very good movie. It's very well put together. I like that basic, like not that nothing happens, that the stakes are relatively low, except that it's not. It's like trying to bring the last bit of hope out of the kind of like keep it alive essentially. A very slow chase is kind of the whole thing of it, which is really cool. Cinematography stunning. The performances are great, and I loved the conclusion. And I really hope they don't go back in it of what's her name?
Rey.
Yeah, Rey not being related to anyone important. That she's just no one. Because like that's surely the best thing you can do is that like. You're not suggesting that to be important in this universe you have to be related to a lightsaber, to a Star Killer, Skywalker.
My father, the lightsaber. I could do a whole different episode of a podcast about this, but I have strong feelings about this, where Star Wars is very encumbered by the idea of the hero's journey of good versus evil, and what.
It of course is the original text through which Joseph Campbell would have taught the hero's journey.
Yeah. It was like 100% how it's meant to be, that it's very archetypal, but it means that when people try to deviate from that formula in Star Wars, they're often severely punished by the either the creators or the narrative, and it doesn't allow you that. So yeah, The Last Jedi is perfect sense. It's just such a good Christmas film. Like excitement and young girls dressing up as Rey and
that stuff like absolutely killed me.
Yeah,
loved it.
It's exceptional. So do we actually agree on all that except for that slight maybe variation on Rogue One? And
yeah, I don't have a deep and abiding love for the Empire Strikes Back.
People fucking love The Empire Strikes Back.
I'm totally aware. Yeah. I just haven't watched it enough. Whereas I'd probably put A New Hope. New Hope?
A New Hope, yeah.
I'd probably put A New Hope before that. Or after that.
Better than.
Yeah. Just because, like, I mean, A New Hope, I found that movie kind of endlessly rewatchable. It's very just like fun.
Yeah. It's very it's mesmerizing, and also I think we talked a little bit about this.
It's out of nowhere, just in the world,
Yeah, and we talked a little bit of this in terms of you playing the game. Is that because Star Wars has been so enduring, we still look at the 70s aesthetics of like kind of rounded white plastic costumes and like those holograms that are really grainy and just the way everything looks. You wouldn't allow those things to continue to be making films if they hadn't put the 70s in stasis a little bit.
Quite similar to Alien Isolation, how that carried on that beautiful 70s cassette tape. All our machines Betamax. all our computers are on like ribbons and wires and stuff, kind of thing. Yeah, it's wonderful. Everything's like a hard plastic.
Everything's a hydraulic switch.
It's all matte hard plastic is what it is, Yeah. But no, how that like game continued that aesthetic in a beautiful way. And it's the same kind of thing. It's great.
By comparison, that seeing in the Alien sequel Prometheus, where one of the screens is showing Windows 7.
Yeah.
Okay. The Zeppo.
Yeah.
Speaking of 70s aesthetic, I always like to make a connection here.
Okay.
Xander dresses like a vampire throughout this episode.
He dresses so bad.
He dresses like he owns a timeshare condo in Florida.
How do you feel about the Zeppo in terms of just the canon? What is your like the Zeppo feeling? Because like a lot of people would rate it in the top 10 episodes.
I was very aware of this episode coming up, and I was like, I really wanted to form a modern opinion on it. It definitely isn't one of the episodes. It's funny if you asked me to list great Buffy episodes, I wouldn't have remembered it. I wouldn't have thought to rate it.
Sure.
And yet, there's so much in it that is so, for lack of a more academic term, me about it. Because
you are a Xander, really.
Well, we'll unpack that since we have nearly 50 episodes of you saying how much you hate Xander because he's a worm, which we won't do much of in this episode because this is a strong episode for Xander.
It is.
Absolutely. But it's like so much of what has become the canon now in terms of megatextual media and kind of playing with, format and trope and kind of, hanging a lampshade on. I remember the way Buffy's always been really melodramatic with Angel. The show actually knowing that. Obviously it's been done before Buffy, but it's never been done this well or in this way. And this is the episode that really kind of crystallizes it in a way. And I also think that it is an episode that really shows that it's not embarrassed of his roots in kind of schlocky horror a little bit and kind of raising the dead and
high school format as well. That's a huge element here. They're playing with that very much. You
really do get the love that the show has for what inspired it. So I think I've actually evaluated this episode very much so in terms of I think it's one of the strongest episodes we've had so far in many ways.
Yeah, it's super strongly written.
Yeah, now in a different direction to a more straight-laced episode. But this show has so many things in its toolbox, and I think you can have the Boggy, the Zeppo, and something like Restless, for example, and they all form part of the same show.
Yeah, and I would say that this episode is probably the episode that does introduce that structural format shifting and playfulness as a literary concept rather than anything else for the first time. This is the first episode that breaks the structure. I think this episode is stunningly well written. It's just a masterpiece of situational comedy in some ways and of tone. It's so well put together. It's so playfully holding itself together. It's not one of those ones I love. I really admire it. I don't love it. I wouldn't go writing essays about it.
Sure.
Maybe because Xander is the main character, but some part of me is like, not enough Buffy. you know.
So it's a Buffy Light episode, which
It
are
is.
rare in this show.
Yeah, and very importantly, I'm sure you read this as well, but it influenced Russell T Davies specifically.
Yeah.
So Russell T Davies was the showrunner for Queer as Folk back in the day, and he was the showrunner for Doctor Who when it revived in 2005. He specifically was influenced by this episode to make Love and Other Monsters, which is an episode in which a guy gets blowjobs off a street
Pavement slab.
pavement slab.
But that's
It is maybe the worst episode of Doctor Who.
Okay, so I will speak briefly about this. Love and Other Monsters established
Doctor Light episodes.
Within Doctor Who, the idea of episodes of Doctor Who where the Doctor isn't really there. But it was one of the earliest, and I would say one of the least condescending examples of in-universe showing the fans of something. I mean, basically, so because in-universe, a Doctor really, like, people who met the Doctor support group, but it's basically about fans of Doctor Who and about the phenomenon around that. And lots of shows have done stuff since that. Now, there's Sherlock, which I actually found was quite disrespectful to his fans in many ways. There's in Supernatural, the boys have gone to a Supernatural convention where they've seen cosplays of themselves making out. Like, it's gone to the nth degree. But with Doctor Who, it was more about actually talking about that phenomenon, which had never really been done that way before.
And they're talking about how they create their own genuine community, and they actually have, it's mainly about like genuinely being appreciative of what they've contributed.
So it was well intentioned, but Peter Kay is in it as a monster that was decided
the Absorbaloff.
Very well done, Brian.
Thank you.
It was decided. I'm not going to deride it too much because it was decided by a child in a Blue Peter competition, but it's very Blue Peter. It's very BBC.
Yeah, it really is.
And it's just the tone doesn't really land. But yeah, as you said, Russell Davies said that he was inspired partly by this in terms of this. If we look at Buffy as just such a myth maker in terms of television, that again, if not established, but crystallized and perfected the concept of an episode that looked like this is Rosencrantz and Guildenstern,
Oh, you read that too. I didn't need to read it, Joel.
Brian, I didn't read that, okay? This is just me knowing this stuff, okay?
Okay, well, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead is a Tom Stoppard play from 1967 about Hamlet's two friends who are very briefly mentioned in Hamlet a couple of times, but it's basically saying, oh, let's follow their story, and Hamlet is actually the backstory there, or not the backstory. Sorry,
he's in the background.
He's in the background, exactly. I think won the Pulitzer that year. I might be wrong, but it's a great play. Tom Stoppard is generally very, very interesting. He's a super big conservative, but he is he's a very interesting writer. He really is magic. He does magic with a form. Anyway, sorry, I've read a lot of Tom Stoppard. Go on.
Okay, well, I won't claim I've read a lot of Tom Stoppard, but I am aware of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, and it's been cited a lot in definitely the last 10 years as television has gotten at times navel-gazingly metatextual about things.
Community
again does it well in many ways.
It is just constant pastiches of itself.
Yeah, absolutely. But now it's de rigueur now because we have in the stable of new Star Trek TV shows that are coming out. There's one about the lower decks, which is about basically the support crew on the ship while the captain is doing the important stuff. Like, this has become something that we can just in the wheelhouse of episodes that a show can do, like musical episodes and all these things now. But this is the example for me anyway. And I'm sure there are earlier examples, but they don't jump to mind the way the Zeppo does.
I mean, to be honest, I don't know any TV show as well as I do Buffy from before this era. Buffy is kind of the earliest example of like a text I know super, super well. My So-Called Life maybe, or Frasier or Friends, or but this is pretty.
If you pick out something like Frasier, that would be a perfect show that had enough of a self-awareness to potentially do something like this, and I don't think it ever does actually have people looking on Frasier to that degree.
So here's something I want to talk to you about. Free and direct discourse. Do you know what that is, Jolie?
Yes, but why don't you define it for our listening audience?
Yeah, sure. So free and direct discourse is a term mostly associated in the earliest instance with Flaubert, who wrote Madame Bovary's Lover, which if you haven't read it, it's absolutely worth a read. It's one of the best translated pieces of literature of all time. So the fact that it was originally in French, don't worry about it.
Of course, the remake with Robin Williams, Flubber,
of course. So, but it's basically the novel is about a woman who like basically loses her sense of reality through reading novels, and it's great. It's a really, really stunning book. But the idea there with free and direct discourse is it's a narratological device whereby the third person narrator takes on the voice of the character it's describing. Mm-hmm. So that sounds complicated. Let's break it down. In the very famous opening line of The Dead by James Joyce, it says, I don't know the exact quote because I can't exact quote anything, but it says, Grace was literally run off her feet. Mm-hmm. So Grace is a servant in this house, mm-hmm. and the suggestion there is that has been really worked hard all mm-hmm. day. Of course, if that is a third person narrator saying that, you have to look at that and say, wait, what the heck? Because she isn't literally run off her feet. She isn't, that's being run off your feet is
slang.
It's a metaphor. Yeah. It's slang, and it means you're really tired.
Yeah. So
what's happening there is that the narrator, when it goes to describe another person, it will use much more formal language, while not being an actual character in the text, the narrator,
Yeah.
So essentially what it does is when it gets close to a character, it takes on their character, their tone of voice, mm-hmm. to inject something into the text. It's something that Joyce does extensively, actually, in Ulysses, to the extent that the text takes on voices of just every piece of literature of all time to try to find an objective way of showing the truth of a character. So that's very dark discourse. It's really cool. It's where the narrative through line of a text takes on the voice of its characters, essentially. So in this episode, what I think is happening is this episode is a point of view episode from Xander, obviously. It's the first non-Buffy point of view to a degree, but it specifically takes on Xander's voice. Yeah. So in the opening scene, we have Willow arrive with her, all the gang have arrived. They are fighting the sister of Jay, the sisterhood of Jay, who are bringing the end of the world. Willow arrives creating this fog storm, holding a candle, but very importantly, she arrives in a Dutch angle with a floating camera work. Mm. This is not the camera work of Buffy. This is not how it portrays itself. But what it is the camera work of action movies from the 80s. Mm-hmm. The Dutch angle is where you take if you look at a normal landscape shot and just say it's level, and you tilt it, say, 30 degrees to create a dramatic effect, usually shot from below. It's very much the language of action movies and schlocky kind of movies. Yeah,
a villain might open the front doors of their mansion and be shot from below in kind of a scary quote-unquote angle.
Exactly. And who do we know who is, exemplifies that kind of schlocky 80s, silly nerd shit?
Alexander Lafayette Harris.
Exactly. So that shot, and from that point onwards, most of this episode is portrayed through Xander's point of view, and the cinematography, the humor of the editing, the portrayal of the different scenes is 100% told in Xander's language. So when Xander, later on in the episode, when he tries to get advice on what to do with all these zombies running around, because that's what happens, he goes to find Buffy. Buffy and Angel are having the most insane conversation of all time. They're like, I can't lose you again, and there's swelling music, and Buffy and Angel theme.
You might be ready to go, but I'm not ready for you to leave. Yeah,
exactly, and it's insane. And then Xander arrives, and he's like, "Oh, hey!" And the music completely cuts out.
Yeah,
and he's like, "I'm sorry to interrupt," and they're like, they don't say anything to him. They just stare him out of it. And he's like, "Okay, I'm just gonna go." And then music dramatically rises again when they get ready to go back to it. Buffy and Angel weren't having that kind of moment. I mean, they were, but the tone of it, the portrayal of it, the context of
melodrama is projected by Xander's point of view. It's projected
from Xander's point of view because that is how Xander understands Buffy. So not only is it a useful tool because it's creating that sense of humor and the contrast between Xander's B-plot and the traditional A-plot, which is actually the B-plot of this episode, it's also just his perspective. So when Faith is bunking him and you can see the reflection in the TV screen, and they have a moment of of closeness afterwards, that happened, but also she kicks him out because that's Xander's life.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's free and direct discourse. That is, I want you, Joel, to have a look at this episode all through the the shattered lens that is Xander's psyche.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mic drop emoji. I think that's very astute. I think another probably more overt example of that would be in season 7 with Storyteller from Andrew's perspective.
Yep.
In the sense that that's just a really literal example of, you know, these events seen through both the perspective but also the mode of perception of a different person. But like, yeah, it's very much that Xander parses all of these things through his sense of humor. It's a very basic thing to say about Xander, but it's true. That's how he interacts with things. And notably at the end of the episode where he does actually display some specific independence and courage and how he confronts Jack and wakes out the bomb before it explodes, that humor kind of drops out of it. It actually returns momentarily to the kind of more level tone of a Buffy confrontation, because he actually is displaying strength of will, and then it gets kind of funny again. So I think that's very much what's happening here.
There's something to be said here about, like, you know, what does that call to mind with the rest of the text? Because if this is the episode through which Xander's point of view is being portrayed, does that mean that the rest of the show is being told through Buffy's perspective? I would probably say no. I think that some things don't need a point of view character to influence the text. I don't think that, you know, Buffy's POV is influencing how other things are being portrayed, except in the body. I think the body is specifically Buffy's POV. It shows Dawn as being kind of like a bit silly until, you know, this awful news arrives. You get like literal shots from Buffy's perspective in that episode where she's looking at the I think it's the ambulance men, and she can't see half their faces and stuff like this because she can't look at it, and everything's too bright, faded, all these things. So point of view, something we're going to have to keep an eye on. It's a cool one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think very much in terms of adopting that 80s action movie approach to things, that you also have the 80s teenage high school hijinks in this, very much so. For sure. And I think heavy influence notes from B horror movies, particularly your Evil Deads. Definitely in the makeup. In the makeup of the zombies, in terms of just like the fighting people with a fire axe, but the actual the beastie itself that comes out of the Hellmouth is very much like the evil itself in Evil Dead 2. Yeah, that kind of very practical, or the Thing, but it's not as good as the Thing. You know, practical effects, yeah. But like huge horrific monster and all this kind of stuff. You know, so yeah, it's very much. I'd say this is a very very affectionate episode. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Weirdly, like, yeah, what I'm kind of reading from this movie is things like Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and from this episode even, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and what I also got was a good bit of Dazed and Confused, that like genuine slice of life of teenagers, but also the kind of like ridiculousness of those kind of like, you know, bro, dude, no, it was very California. What's funny is the episode in that whole initial fight with the sisterhood underneath the cave is just very strangely shot, very strangely narratively positioned, and it does end with Xander pulling himself out of the garbage. It does. It highlights the fact that like we're usually in the fray with the gang. We usually feel like one of the gang. That scene was shot like we were outsiders. Yeah, and I think what was interesting is that something they play for comic effect is that every time he tries to ask what's actually happening, people get distracted and don't tell him what the plot is, what the apocalypse is. But again, it does highlight the fact that as viewers, we have a lot of knowledge. We have all the knowledge, but in an individual episode, if you were to actually plot who knows what, most people only have parts of the information usually. Maybe Oz was here for the part where they said who it was, but he's gone to like make sure that the place is barricaded so we didn't hear where they were. You need to have that overview to get what's going on a lot of the time. Did you notice all the penises in this episode? I didn't. Is that good or bad? Probably good. One of the books that I refer to a lot when we talk in this podcast, which you are listening to right now, is Why Buffy Matters by Rhonda Wilcox. And in this book, as I've referred to a couple of times, she specifically highlights 5 or 6 different episodes to look at in depth. The previous ones were Surprise and Innocence. The Zeppo was one of them. I think the next one's probably going to be Restless, and then the next one after that is probably The Body. So that's really cool. She, highlighting different things from. So this is the episode that she highlights in terms of looking at comedy, of comedic tension,
etc. But she specifically says, like, yeah, there's just lots of penises in this episode.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, we've talked before about how important naming is in Buffy.
Sure.
Who's the bad guy in this episode, Joel?
Jack O'Toole.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. What does Jack O'Toole use to threaten people?
Big Bowie knife.
Big Bowie knife that he calls.
Katie.
And how does Xander refer to driving around in his car? It handles like a dream about warm, sticky things.
Oh wow, he does indeed. And also one of his friends is also, so his friends are, two of his friends are Dickie and Big Bob.
Yeah, there you go. What does Faith say to him when they're about to have sex?
That should help him around the curves.
She'll steer him around the curves.
Okay.
So
he also just does talk about being erect.
Talks about being erect, yeah. So there's lots of penile imagery in this episode. When Xander is about to run down into the basement, which, I mean, okay, he is interrupted by a huge penis-like thing shoving its face through the wall.
That's true. He does
protruding through the wall.
He does scream, and there also is just like straight up and down a scene where he says to a police officer when Jack threatens him outside the Bronze,
"We were wrestling."
Two boys wrestling, but not in a gay way, which like has to be like one of like less than 20 times on the show that the word gay is mentioned. If you know what I mean, like it's kind of odd. Incidentally, that cop who was there very briefly is Vaughn Armstrong, who is the most prolific guest actor in Star Trek, in the sense.
But was he in the original series or Discovery?
No.
Oh, well, there.
Because he's not the right age for, well, at least for the original series. But he's portrayed the most number of alien species
very cool.
out of any guest actor, and then eventually play a human on Enterprise and have a very upsetting character arc.
Of course. If we're talking about penile imagery, the car has to always be an extension of the penis in literary terms. Like, if you have to have that one spelled out to you, then maybe you haven't spoken to a man about his car anytime recently. So you're right. So guest actors. Okay, I had that one for you actually. If you hadn't picked up that it was him, I had
I
read
know
for you.
Paul.
Of course. Jack O'Toole. Mm-hmm. That I can't remember. I didn't note the actor's name. Do you remember the episode Halloween for My So-Called Life?
Yeah.
Where they go into the thing during Halloween, into the school during Halloween. They're all dressed up. Angela's wearing a costume from the 50s. It's Sadie Hawkins dance weekend or something.
Yes,
and
I do remember. Yeah.
She remembers Billy, who fell from the rafters and died there because she found a note from him in her pocket because it was from, I don't know, anyway. That was Billy.
That's a convoluted plot, but yes. Okay.
So that means that he's a dead high school student in two different shows.
Yeah. Wow.
Still present, yeah. So that's cool. And Bob was in The Walking Dead for years, but I actually know him. He was from...
so Bob, who was a zombie in this...
He was indeed. He was wearing the Leatherman jacket. He was actually in Band of Brothers. He was one of the many people who was in Band of Brothers. But yeah, I wouldn't know him from that.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. He seems to have been like a pretty big character in Walking Dead. So.
But yeah, I really read a lot about The Walking Dead last night when I couldn't get to sleep. So that chap who's on Younger, who I really like, Nico Tortorella, he's on the new Walking Dead as well. So I just read like all about The Walking Dead.
But you like him? Isn't he disgusting bisexual though?
He is. That's actually the only reason I like him. It's the only for some people that's their only personality.
Yeah, I mean, clearly.
Yeah.
So as we're talking about masculinity, obviously masculinity, penises are here because masculinity is a huge theme in this episode. Xander has a big conversation about, coolness and identity with Oz, and coolness can just stand in for masculinity in this episode.
Sure.
Xander is exploring this kind of like boyish, fragile masculinity here in this episode, in the sense that he is trying to find an identity that is his without having to, do anything about it.
It's called combination, Xander and Oz having like a solo or like a one-on-one conversation.
Yeah. And the Jack and his friends obviously all exemplify that kind of toxic jerk from the 90s, I suppose, in high school. Mm-hmm. So that kind of tension is there throughout. And Xander, of course, saving the day when he actually does manage to be, the heart of his group, where he can, be brave for a moment because he knows he doesn't want his friends to die.
Yeah.
And of course that being the trait in which his genuinely matured character is built on. Yeah. So from this point, I think hopefully this is a turning point for Xander. I don't 100% think it is, but it should be, in a sense that it is the first moment where he has a heroic moment, not based on what his physical prowess is, but what he can offer actually.
Yeah, I think it just crystallized that he is at his best able to be there for his friends when they don't necessarily know or appreciate it. Because to be fair to Xander, to be fair to his characterization, you would expect him to come up at this scene at the very end where they're all talking about their survival and kind of really shove his oar in and say this whole thing happened. But he kind of doesn't do that. He kind of just accepts very much that his role is, to support in this way. And as I was kind of saying to you before we start recording, that this concept that in a superpowered group or in a cult group or a supernatural group, that there is someone who is the mundane or the human, the heart.
The everyman.
The everyman very much has become a real focal point, I think, of supernatural and fantasy TV shows and media. Again,
I would draw a line back to Leo Bloom there, but come on.
So
I'm a nerd, but
so you think that Leo Bloom in Ulysses is an archetypal example of an everyman in supernatural fiction?
I think it's a type archetypical. Archetypical. What is it?
Archetypal? That's what I would say.
I think he's an archetype of everyman for all literature and all text.
Sure. Okay. Well, he's definitely everyman.
Yeah.
But if we're talking specifically, which I will,
Ulysses could be considered a hard text.
It is for me, Brian.
Okay.
It is for me.
I was for a second there. I was like, "Oh, should I go get my copy of Ulysses there and just be able to like show you some examples?" And then I was like, "Oh no, wait, that is literal hell for everyone who's not me."
Literary hell as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so again, an easy one for me to pull just because it is so formulaic in some ways, but it's supernatural. Has specifically a support character who is, the human who
Bob.
I think it might be Bob who builds things for them. I think eventually he becomes an angel or something. They all do, but initially in the core of the show, and any of those derivatives will usually have someone who is their fixer, but they're not a genius. It's just someone who is able to do like the mundane things that need to be done.
Yeah.
And as I was mentioning, that there is a quite a well regarded tabletop RPG game system called Monster of the Week, which is basically used to recreate Buffy-like scenarios, and the mundane is a specific character class, and it has abilities like that are heart-based abilities like rallying your friends, always being able to find your way out of a life or death situation by the skin of your teeth, stuff like that the mundane tends to do. And that's what Xander does. Like, Xander should have his neck snapped every other week. He manages to survive just by his conviction.
Yeah, but what's really interesting about that is that Captain America is probably the everyman of the Avengers, and I always think that's very funny because he's obviously a superhero. But this show is interesting because our viewpoint character, our way in, and our like audience surrogate isn't Xander. Xander is very rarely the audience surrogate. Yeah. He often is voicing things that are more complex and more shit than the audience wants to be of the opinion of. Our viewpoint character is Buffy.
Yeah.
Which is just so unusual. Well, because the everyman is usually the viewpoint character.
Yeah, and it's unique in the sense that
Wesley is supposed to be that.
There are two ways that texts usually make a fiction universe accessible in this way. Two common ways. One is by either having an everyman character, a human surrogate. So this supernatural hidden task force has been doing this for years, but you've just been picked up as your first day on the job because you were where the bomb went off, and they have to explain Torchwood to you, or S.H.I.E.L.D., or whatever it might be.
Rose in Doctor Who and stuff.
Rose, exactly. The companion Doctor Who is a perfect example of that. Or you have a hero, a protagonist who is themselves quite boring or quite standard or middle of the line. Riley in Buffy in a different show would be that really kind of traditional hero where the people around him can be interesting by comparison. Buffy has always been unusual in that way because Buffy is such a fascinatingly interesting main character, and she neither drowns out or is drowned out by the people around her in the balance. And what's interesting to think, and I'm thinking this as I'm saying it to you,
it's very unusual for you,
that Joss Whedon, took this ensemble building skill he had with the Scooby Gang and applied it to the Avengers.
Yeah.
Because there's so much in those films where you have to balance so many contrasting personalities and backstories and power levels and all this kind of stuff. And he does actually make a superhero team seem like people by and large, which is actually a quite unusual achievement. I think it derives from this this narrative history with Buffy.
Yeah, you're right. I would agree. I'll say very briefly, Jack O'Toole is a walking aid. He is a penis-loving zombie dead man who sets off a bomb in the basement. We've often talked about how the basement exemplifies the id. And he's very clearly a shadow self of Xander, and Xander stands up to him. He recognizes the absurdity of the world in an existential sense, and he is able to get to a more authentic self.
Mm-hmm. Xander is. So, Freudian theory, existentialism, tick for the episode, great. Yeah, and then Jack, realizing he's no longer needed, opens a closet in the basement of his mind and is eaten by a werewolf.
Yeah, I pointed out to you, I think this is a really nice note. He walks into a room that says, at all...
under no circumstances. This door must be kept closed at all times. Or...
At all times, exactly. Because Oz in there, and he's a werewolf, etc. Mm-hmm. But Jack immediately walks through the door being like, you haven't seen the last of me, Xander Harris, and immediately gets eaten because Cordelia refers to him earlier in the episode as subliterate. So he clearly just could not read the sign on the door, and that's actually kind of sad.
Yeah. Do you feel some empathy there, Brian?
I do.
Is it difficult to go through the world?
Not being able to read?
Not being able to read.
I don't know. Is it? I can read, Joel. I can read.
I asked you to read something the other day, and it was inconclusive, to say the least.
Do you remember that reading test? Did I send it to you?
You did. I didn't complete your reading test. I will.
Okay, I did it, and it was like, oh, you're about the readings. You read about as quickly as someone who's in the 8th grade.
But when you were, how old were you in the 8th grade? Usually 12?
About that, no. Yeah.
Yeah, but when you're 8, having a 12-year-old's reading level is a really impressive thing to have.
My comprehension is really good with reading. I just am incredibly slow with reading, so.
Yeah, you chew over those little morsels and you really get the nutrition.
I read well, not fast.
Absolutely.
Yeah. My friend Hildy did that same test and she got 1,000 words per minute, and I have never heard anything that explained one person more. She is fucking mad.
Noted director Hildegard Ryan.
She is, yeah.
Reads at the speed of a
hummingbird.
Hummingbird, yeah.
Oh, her demon would definitely be a hummingbird.
Absolutely. Ooh, let's watch some His Dark Materials tonight.
I'd love to.
That'd be good. Do we want to slide gracefully into a dusting?
Do you have any lore notes for this episode?
Yeah, so in this episode, we've seen a magic shop or magic shoppers multiple times before, but I feel like this episode really crystallizes. There is the magic shop over there. It's currently called Uncle Bob's Magic Cabinet. But it does become a consistent location on the set, and I think it's starting to really firm up there. This episode features very specifically, obviously, on the Hellmouth itself. The Hellmouth being a slightly, maybe appropriately, ephemeral concept in Buffy.
Sure.
Is the Hellmouth an actual portal? Is it a physical entrance to a portal?
It does get as open as it does when the Master opens it in this episode, which is mad.
Yeah, exactly. What actually happens when it opens, when it's closed, why does it still affect things, etc. But this is the last appearance of the Hellmouth Spawn, the demon. Mm-hmm. That the Master ostensibly
Hydra, many-headed thing, yeah.
Summoning. The Sisterhood of Jay are instantiated here as a very apocalyptic. Their whole point is bringing the end of the world. They very much continue that tradition in Angel. Demons of this particular kind and this kind of narrative presentation are very common on Angel, and the Sisterhood specifically appear in the Angel comics, trying to bring the world down again.
I meant to say to you, are there any? Does Xander ever get powered in the comics?
Does Xander ever get powered in the comics? I would be hesitant to say conclusively that in no issue does he get powered, or at no arc to get powered. Generally not, though. His role becomes essentially the leader of the new Watchers Council.
Sure.
He becomes a Nick Fury type character, essentially. So really, and I think that's fair, to be honest, because that's a natural extension of him being the coordinating heart of the group, and he helps moderate the new Slayers, what I still kind of think of as potentials, because they're Slayer Pagawans or whatever, but no, there's no point that I'm aware of where he ever becomes like a boy Slayer or anything horrific like that.
One thing I actually know about this episode that I haven't said so far is that this episode I think has the best music of any episode so far. The music is just so expressive. The swelling strings when Buffy and Angel are in love, and
the sexy Faith music when Faith has sex.
Absolutely. And then the playful pizzicato, crunchy, like, you know, silly percussion of Xander's music is just great. It's so appropriate, and the whole episode is music based, and it delivers your tone via the music. It's like, oh, here's a pastiche of a dramatic scene because we have dramatic music, and here's
music's telling a story.
Exactly. And it's like, when it's in the scenes where it's playful, it immediately jumps into the you know, it's really good. It's really smart.
I do know. I didn't know until you gave me that example, but now I'm really clear on
great
on what you meant.
Let's move into the dusting there, Joel.
Absolutely.
Can I throw some Buffy Bits at you?
Yeah, hit me some Buffy Bits.
So I don't have any huge amount of Buffy Bits that are structural. I have more observations and a couple of nice quotes for you. So we discussed this when we were watching this, but the shot where Xander and Oz are talking in the cafeteria, there's a shot of all the spaghetti and stuff. That is the literal same shot from I Only Have Eyes for You of the cafeteria. You can even see Nicholas Brennan in the background wearing the clothes he was wearing on that day. It's very confusing. Yeah. As he said earlier, I think, this is the episode that made Nicholas Brennan cry when he read it because it was just so good. Here's a couple of quotes I thought were great. Willow says at one point, "Occasionally I'm callous and strange," and it was just great.
When she was talking about toasty marshmallows over some burning bodies.
Yeah. I really love Cordelia's line when she witnesses Xander being humiliated by Jack. She says, "Of all the humiliations you faced, that sure was the latest." She's like, oh. And the last thing I thought was really great was when when Giles was explaining how bad of a situation they're all in to Buffy and Willow. He was like, "I have to go and see if I can talk to some spirits. Nothing's working out. It's all going to be awful. And wait, did you finish all the jellies?" Talking about the donuts. And I was like, you know what? That's so nice of Giles to say it like that, because he should really be saying the jam donuts. Yeah,
he's often he's very like. I love that he is just friends with these teenagers, because he's like, "I always want a jelly. I'm always the one who says we should have a jelly in the mix."
If we're sending Xander on another run,
yeah, it's very endearing. And so I'll just now, again, just a couple of observations. This is, I think, the first time definitely stuck out to me where I've seen Giles wearing a fleece.
Yeah, so he does wear a fleece.
But I think it's the start of him being casual Rupert as opposed to official Watcher outfit. Because like that's very much what all 3 seasons 6 and stuff, he wears fleeces. Yeah,
it's very endearing
all the time. It's very much so. I really enjoy in this episode that they use this call and response thing, where they'll say, someone will say in one scene where do they want to blow up, and the next shot will be the answer, which will be the school. And
or the classic example being like Oz being like, "Don't worry about it, Xander. It's not the end of it's not," and then Giles saying, "It's the end of the world."
Yeah. And then I think it's worth mentioning as well that the title, the Zeppo. Yeah. So Zeppo Marx being one of the Marx brothers, but
the fifth Marx
brother, but usually in that context the least regarded, or maybe the least like enduring.
Yeah, he usually played the straight man. I think the last thing he was in Duck Soup.
Yeah, exactly. So very much the and also the Zeppo is here, which is it's
a weird pull.
It's a weird pull for Cordelia to have called him.
Yes.
So I think that's a little bit more Joss Whedon speaking to some degree, but it's also weirdly, I think, a parallel to what I was saying about there being a lot of shared stuff here with the Evil Dead.
Yeah, sure.
Because in terms of the Evil Dead, you get a lot of references to Shemps, which is from the Three Stooges. Oh. But again, Shemp was like one of the brothers. You know, he was I was often Sam Raimi, director of Evil Dead, his little brother would play the Shemp character, which is fake Shemp, so whoever he's standing in for someone. But it just kind of felt a lot of that, you know, American horror / comedy shared history. You know?
I always find it very fascinating that America has that shared understanding of the Three Stooges and the Marx Brothers movies and all these things, because like just those things didn't really make it over here in our generation. Maybe in previous generations, but in our generation it's just, I mean, we wouldn't know those things. Gilligan's Island, I've no fucking idea, sorry.
Yeah, they're on an island.
Mulligan's Island?
No, you're right, Gilligan's Island. Okay. Yeah. There's one called Professor, I think.
Yeah, sure. Curly and Moe or something. So, some
Beijing people now.
Am I?
Yeah. Go on.
Some fashion notes. Cordelia's dressed like a fucking business lady at some point in this episode. She's clearly wearing like a Ralph Lauren suit for no fucking reason.
Cordelia owns 51% of this high school in this episode.
Xander is wearing the worst shirt I've ever seen him wear in this episode. It is like marbled, like wannabe floral, wannabe paisley thing. It's just the fucking worst.
Willow's wearing a romper which has the same pattern as my granny's carpet.
Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure that Buffy's hair is being touched by Xander's free and direct discourse, because I don't think Sarah Michelle Gellar would actually ever wear her hair like that. It is like wet look, mousse effect, and her broken fringe has made a reappearance. It looks awful.
Is this like when Homer remembers something and Marge's hair is green and he's like 10 foot tall?
Yes.
Buffy was wearing a shearling jacket though in the episode, which I thought was quite
I like
fetching.
That,
I liked it.
Yeah.
Okay, so
do you have a death count for me there, Joel?
I do. It was quite a deathful episode. Yeah. So we've two unidentified Sister Crochet sisters who were evidently killed moments before Willow parks her clouding spell. Faith impales one of the sisters using a sword, but with a really unorthodox movement where she kind of like runs at her with the sword like it's a big stick, rather than actually stabbing her as is traditional. We have a little hereditary homage there where Xander accidentally decapitates one of the zombies while driving. It says I have noted here Dickie is killed by the Sisterhood of Crochet, but he is eating. They very specifically note that they eat their kills, so he's eating the Bix. Big Bob, who's crushed by a vending machine pushed by Xander. 3 of the sisters who were killed after the helmet opens, and finally Jack O'Toole, who was devoured by Oz in werewolf form,
who feels oddly full the next day.
Like in this episode, again, arguably Xander has killed a couple of people who he did interact with and present as people up until very recently beforehand, and Oz ate a guy.
Yeah. Do you have a rating out of 10, Joe?
I do. I would give this probably a 9.2 kerosene filled cakes.
Okay.
I was really surprised by it. I think it's a great example of Buffy is a deeply funny show.
Oh yeah. And it's maybe the funniest episode of Buffy.
Yeah, we're cackling at it 25 years later. I just enjoyed it. I think it's a master class in form and structure in television, and it's an example of why television is and remains an elevated art form, not something that's just
aping cinema.
Exactly.
I totally agree. I'm actually going to give it 9.1 warm sticky things out of 10.
Okay.
So yeah, I agree. It's just it's not necessarily my thing. I don't have a graw for it, but I do think it is a really stunning example of form, structure, humor, and self-awareness. I definitely think it heralded so much of what TV is currently.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just wish it wasn't for Xander Harris. I know, it's fine. I'm glad it's right. Xander Harris.
He did a good job.
He did. Nicholas Brennan did a good job in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
well, thanks so much for listening, Superfangs. So if you like this episode and if you'd like to tell us what you think, you can tweet us at Buffy Boys on Twitter, where most of your tweets will tend to happen. And tell your friends and tell your apocalyptic sister hugs.
You didn't know what you were going to say there.
Well, I got there in the end, Brian. That's what it's all about. It's not the destination, it's the journey. Isn't that right?
No.
Where there was only one set of footprints in the sand, Buffy Summers was carrying me. So yeah, thanks so much for listening, and we will see you for next week for Bad Girls and the introduction of Wesley Wyndham Price.
Can't wait.
See you next time on Buffy Boys.
Buffy Boys does whatever a Buffy boy can. Okay, you're singing along with me. I don't think you should be.
Goodbye.
See ya.